皆さん、こんにちは。よろしくお願いします。日本語を話せる方で、今日の講義は英語で行います。そしたら、今日はですね、3つのトピックスを紹介します。ちょっと忙しいというます。So I have arranged 3 topics for you today. And the 3 topics, so we're going to have a quite busy time. But I think you'll find I hope you'll find it somewhat interesting. And I myself come from Ireland, and the Irish people have a deep affinity with Armenians because we have a difficult neighbor like you for many hundreds of years. So I think you know exactly what I mean by that. So today I'm going to introduce, first of all, very quickly, Japanese culture. It's a very introductory kind of talk on that. When I'm introducing Japanese culture, I want you to think about what is relevant for Armenian. So we talk about the flowers of Japan, which flowers are blooming now in Armenia, and so on. And because the reason why I'm talking about Japanese culture is to relate it to the promotion of culture for tourism and for other benefits to the economy. So then we'll talk a little bit about my True Japan project, and then finally we'll talk about natural disasters and how natural disasters affected Japanese culture. So we'll start off with a introduction to the 100 poets, one poem each. And this was the first book of Japanese poetry that I translated, and I'll introduce the first of all, the charm of this particular book. And when we talk about the Japanese poetry, many people think that it's very unique and very special and so on. But my idea about Japanese literature is that it's mostly universal. That is, it can be understood by anybody in any country around the world. And the way in which the poems are composed or created are also very similar to the ways in which we compose poetry. Let's take an example. So, here we have a very famous Japanese poem from the 100 Poets. I just remembered I haven't actually said to you why this book is important. This book was compiled in the 13th century by Fujiwara no Teika, and it is the most well-known book of poetry in Japan. So almost all Japanese study this book in high school, and recite many of the poems. There's also a famous card game, Card Club, which is based on this. And I also created the English version. I'll be introducing that later. And it was a textbook of poetry for poets for 800 years. So it's a very, very important collection in Japanese culture and very, very widely known. So by studying this, why was this poetry collection so important to the Japanese? Well, if you read the poems, you can find the key elements of Japanese traditional culture and the traditional sensitivity of the Japanese English. So let's look first of all at the concept of universality. And here we have this very famous poem by Soneno Yoshikara. And I'm going to chant this for you because they say that in Japanese poetry, the compiler of this collection, his father, was called Fujiwara Shunzei. And he said that when we chant the poems, when we speak them out loud, we understand the rhythm for the first time, whether they're great poems or not. And this is also has an origin in ancient Japanese poetry, and the word kotogama. Have any of you ever heard that word, kotogama? It means literally spirit in words. And it means the ancient poets of Nanyoshu, which we'll talk about later, they believed that what we write will become we write. So the words are very, very important. Words themselves. And I'm going to recite this for you now. In both first in English and then first in Japanese and then in English. Now I will do the English version. Sing the bay of your love, which loses the is a dream where it goes. So you can see that the rhythm of the poems, when we chant them, you can hear the rhythm. This is the line of the poems. And I believe that translating the poems, this is the area from which I must pay most attention to, so that they can be chanted in English. And when we play the card game, we always chant, so it's very important for that too. Let's look at another poem on the universal nature. We'll go back to this poem. Why is this poem universal nature? What is it about the poem that makes one feel that any person in the world could very clearly relate to? We have the boat crossing the Jura, and the boatman loses the rudder, and because of that, the boat is adrift. Where is it going? Why is this like being in love? Now, before I'm going to ask you some questions about love, etc., but if anybody has not yet fallen in love, I won't ask you. So could you please put up your hand if you've never fallen in love? If you've never fallen in love. Okay, so I won't ask you then, okay. So I'll ask the other. So you see, the fact that we've all experienced love, that's what makes us human beings, and that's what gives us our universality, okay? So let's now, so that means it's very easy. We can get to the next stage very quickly. So that is, why is the adrift boat like the Would anybody like to tell me? You can answer, by the way, if you like to anyway. That's fine.
I think maybe because the emotions we experience while being in love is just too confusing, and once you're sad or once you're happy and you're dependent on that person, so you don't understand that maybe you love them so much or maybe you hate them so much because you can't find yourself.
Exactly, yes. And one key thing you said was we're very dependent on the other person. Right? So when we get up in the morning, or when we have lunch, or when we come to hear the talk today, you do that by your own volition. You make a choice. I'm going there, I'm going to do this. But when you fall in love, it's not a choice. It's just something that happens to you. And everything depends on the other person, as you say. So let's just look a little bit at the image. What is exactly the same as being in love and having a boat without an oar? Being lost, yeah. Being lost or not having control. Because when you fall in love, you don't have control. So you can see that the poet here has captured that feeling so perfectly. And this is something that's true for all ages, for all nationalities, and this is what we call the universality of poems. And the vast majority of the poems in this collection are of a universal nature. So let's now go back here again. I like to be there rather than here. I'll come right backwards and forwards. So this troubled heart of mine is like the watchfire of the guards of the palace gates. It fades to endless night. It blazes up in the image now. So we can see this poem is based on the idea of the watchfire of the guards. Yeah? And the watchfire of the guards it gets very high in the nighttime and gets very low during the day because we don't need it in the daytime, but we need it again at night to protect the palace. And in the Heian period, the men and women lived separately, and they had a commuting marriage, and it's because of that the men could only visit the women at night, and when the cock crowed, they would have to leave them. So this is the background of this thing. So the poet is saying, my heart is like that fire. During the day, when I cannot meet my love, it goes down. But when I can meet her again at night, the fire in my heart blazes up. So this is a very typical aspect of the Waka poetry. This is a Waka poem. They will take an image from nature, and that will be the image of their heart. Like water rushing down the river rapids. We may be parted by a rock, but in the end, we will be one again. Here we have a beautiful poem about the river running down, and then it comes to a rock, so the one becomes parted and two, but then becomes one again. So this poem is about also true love. If there is true love between two people, then no matter what obstacles they have, they can always come back to each other. Now, is there anybody who would like to get this poem from somebody in the audience? Anybody who would like to receive a poem like this? No. Okay, so like a smile. Good. So now we've been talking about the Japanese sensibility, okay? And I want to now introduce to you some poems about which were developed uniquely in the Japanese culture. And the most obvious choice is this poems about cherry blossom. Many of you know that the famous cherry blossom in Japan, the Silk Spring, it's a pink cherry blossom, and it's called the Sommei Yoshino. And this was developed in the Meiji period. But the cherry blossom on waka poetry is white, and the leaves come out at the same time, and it's called the Yamazaka, or mountain cherry blossom. And this was originally brought from Yoshino, and then planted around the palace and around the capital in the Heian period. And then, when people started to write poems about flowers, they wrote so many about the cherry blossom that the cherry blossom became synonymous with the word for flower. And so let's look at some poems from this collection. Cherry blossoms on this calm, lambent day of spring, why do you scatter with such unquiet love? Here we can see the poet is addressing the cherry blossoms as if they have human qualities. We call this the personification of nature. And it's common in Western poetry too. Here we have the cherry blossoms. Why do you scatter with such unquiet hearts? Addressing the cherry blossoms directly, and you can see the deep affinity for nature in that poem. Let's have a look at this one. Mountain cherry. Let us console each other. Of all those I know, no one understands me. The rain will blossoms. And again, here we have the poet of the autumn, and saying, dear cherry blossoms, please let us feel sympathy for each other, because only you can understand the way I truly feel. And why is that? What is it that is common to the cherry blossoms and the human life? Can anybody tell me?
Maybe I'm not sure, but we know that cherry blossom happens like once a year, and it's really short period of time, and maybe it has something to do with so much
Exactly. So human life is short and fleeting, and so also is the cherry blossoms. Okay, the essence of life is short and fleeting. Okay? And that is the main theme of so much of the poems about the cherry blossom. Now, let's have a look. If only there were no cherry blossoms in this world, what calm would reign in the heart of spring. This is from a very famous book called Tales of Ise, which I also translated for Penguin Books. And in the 82nd chapter, Korikata Noriko is enjoying the cherry blossom festival, or watching the cherries, with his friends. And they place the cherry blossoms in their hair, and they're drinking sake under the trees. In those days, the men would place the cherry blossoms on the trees, not as hair decoration so much as it was kind of like a ritual for receiving the spirit of spring upon themselves. Here we have, if there were no cherry blossoms in this world, how calm we would be in the heart of spring. Because every spring, when the cherry blossoms come, we are so excited, so restless. When will they come? How long will they last? And so on, until they scatter. But then, somebody replies, Chiraba koso, dodo sakara wa mudakado, ugi o nanka sashi. It is because cherry blossoms scatter that air is grey. In this world of sorrow, what lasts long? So, here we have one of the central themes of Japanese literature. I think, and also Japanese aesthetics. It is because the blossoms scatter, theirs. Because in this world of sorrow, nothing lasts. Now, good. Great. So let's have a look. Let's see then, how does that compare to Western literature? And we look at a poem by William Shakespeare. Shall I compare William Shakespeare? How many people know William Shakespeare? Yes? Oh, very good. you're better students than the Georgians. Very good. Shall I compare? Do you know this poem? Does anybody know this poem? It's a famous poem. Yeah? So in the poem, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So in this poem, Shakespeare is comparing his beloved young man to the day of May. And the day of May is passing so quickly, like the cherry blossoms, but his beauty will not fade, he says. So I'm not going to read the whole poem because it will take too long, but we'll skip to the last lines. So we have, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. So your eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of the fair thou owest. Fair, what is fair thou owest? Anybody know fair? Your? Anybody? The fair thou owest. The fair that you have. The fair that owest is what? Fair that is yours. You're fair. You're being fair. But what does fair mean in this case? It's not equal, but rather fair is Elizabethan times. A little bit old uses. We don't use it so much now anymore, but it's literal, there's a boom. So it means beauty. So you will not lose your beauty. And nor shall death brag that wants to reap in his age. And death will not be able to boast, even if you come close to him. When in eternal lines to time thy growth. So in eternal lines, you will live on and on, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see. So long lives this and gives life to thee. So, what are the eternal lines for the person who lives? What so long lives this and gives life to thee? What is this? The poem! It's the poem that lives, right? So, what are the eternal lines? What's written in the poem, the eternal lines of the poem. You're very welcome. No, come in, you're very welcome. Yeah? So we're just talking about a poem by William Shakespeare. Would you like to sit there? Yeah. So, can you hear, if I'm talking to you here without the mic, can you hear me? Yes? Yeah, can you hear me in the back? Yeah. So we'll go backwards and forwards then, because I'd rather to be close to. Well, maybe I could use this. Can I use that? If it's necessary, you need the mic? No. Okay, good. Next, please. So what's your name? Okay. It's going to help you to do the slides, so you can have a more intimate presentation. Okay. So let's have a look now at these images from Western art. We have the Mona Lisa. We have the Michelangelo, the statue of David. Okay. And when we think of art in the Western world, we think of it as being something that will live forever. It shares in the life of God. God is immortal, he lives forever. Man is mortal, he dies. Art lives on and on, like the poem we just read of Shakespeare. You will live in the eternal lines of the poem forever. It's 600 years since Shakespeare's poem was read, but we're still reading it, and the beauty still lives. And when we look at the Mona Lisa now, we still think it's beautiful. We still think it's great art. So this is the biggest difference between the Japanese sensibility and the Western sensibility regarding beauty. Remember when we looked at the poems, it is because they are short-lived that they are splendid. Because they're like the fragile, short-lived life of all beings. So these kind of things, I'm introducing you to very easy to understand, dramatic concepts. Because the final point of this lecture today is to make you think about your country, Armenia. And what is different about Armenia? And how can you convey that to the rest of the world? And how can you, by sharing the culture of Armenia, how can you build the tourism industry? And how can more and more people want to come to your great country every year? So, while I'm talking today, I'd like you to think about, see the talk as a mirror, okay? So Peter's talking about Japan because he loves Japan. But what can I do for my country? How can I, because you were so fortunate to be born in the great country of Armenia, how can you share that? It's not known well enough in the world. It has a great and vast culture and history, but it's not, doesn't get enough exposure. So I hope we can talk about that later in the presentation. Next, please. So I'll just introduce now translating the poems, and for this, next please. I'm going to now. Right. Now I'm going to introduce to you two poems in translation, one poem in translation, just to show you the kind of world that I'm working in every day as a translator of Japanese poems. Okay? So I need to know so we'll just so I'm going to introduce you some poems. I'm going to read two poems. This is a poem about spending the long night alone, and the long night alone is like the long tail of the trumpet pheasant, which is a poem. And I'm going to read the Japanese first, and I want you to see if you notice any sounds that are repeated. Hashibiki no yamadori no saio no hanashi tell me the sounds that were repeated? Huh? The sounds in the poem that were the same sounds. Could you hear them repeated? What were the sounds? No? Yes. No, well done. So, no is yes. So that's the right answer. It's not no. But correct. So we have Ashibiki no, Yamadori no, O no, Chidare O no, Nagamadashi yo o. So please tell me now, what's the point of repeating these sounds? What does it add to the poem? Remember, the poem is describing a long night alone in the lonely mountains. Comparing it to the long time, yeah? Exactly, well done. It makes it seem longer, exactly. A repetition emphasizes the sense of it being a long night. Let me now read the English version, and then I want you to see if you can hear any sounds there as well. Long tail of the copper pheasant trails on and on. Long night alone, the mountains longing for my love. Good. So what's Long, exactly. Long, long, alone, longing, loud. So in this sense, we can recreate the sound patterns in an English translation. So we're not just translating the meaning, but also the rhythm of the original poem. And that's, by the way, it's in English I added one extra element. I made it long like the tail of the pheasant as well. Good. So now we're going to introduce you the Waka Waka poems. Did you have the video now? Tommy's going to show you. Because it's just like 1 minute, but it will give you a good idea about the world of the card. The card game, which is based on, so this is a card game that I made 5 years ago, based on the 100 poems. And this card game is played by 1 million people every year in Japan, in English. Yeah? So through this card game, I want to make a worldwide championship and eventually an Olympic sport. But as Armenians, I want you to think, which work of literature can you make into a card game? And can you make into a world championship? So that people from around the world will come to know more about it. Good. This is a card game that, this is an event that I held with JICA in Daikakuji in Kyoto, and we had 70 JICA students who are now studying in Japan. They came and participated, and also students from Kyoto University, and also from the Santo Ibai Foundation. And we had over 30 nationalities, and as you can see, they were all having just lots and lots of fun. So it's a really fun game. And I think literature, these kind of card games, people don't necessarily like to read poems, but by playing the card game, they can have lots of fun. So next, please. Good. Next, please. So now, next time, this card game was first created for an event at the American Ambassador's Embassy in 2017, which you can see there's the American Ambassador. Next, her cousin is now the Minister of Health in the United States. Next, please. Next, please. Oh, this is an event that we had in Ireland. We had the National Championship in Ireland, which we're going to hopefully to have again this year. Next, please. This is, next, please. So, next, please. So, since 2003, I became the lecturer for JICA, and I've been to Georgia, Romania, Poland, Bulgaria. And I'm going to Ukraine and Czechia in May to give lectures. So through these activities overseas, I'm slowly being able to spread the knowledge of the culture of Japan. Next, please. So these are the countries that I've been to. Next, please. Good. These are just some photographs of the lectures that I've given in the countries. Can you just stick through this? Good. Yeah, students get very excited, and sometimes there's big arguments and punches as well. Yeah. Ready next, please? Good. Yeah. So, yes. So this is a map of the various different places that are connected with the poem collection. And the one at the top there, Daikakuji Temple, this is where we had the event that you just saw. And then there are several temples to the left-hand side in blue, Enryan, and Soinsa, and Jojakoji. And these three temples all claim to be the place where the collection is edited. But they all can't be the place. But it doesn't really matter because they just want to have the sense of the tradition. So I think there must be places like that in Armenia as well. And what is important is the dissemination of the tradition over the generations, right? There's a famous poet in Japan called Onna no Komachi, and she has over 50 graves. But obviously it's just one person, so all of them may not be in the right place, or just one. But that doesn't matter, because it shows you how important she was to Japanese people and how important the tradition of Onna Komachi is. Yesterday I was in Georgia, and one of the students was saying that in Georgia they had a queen. What's her name? Amara? Is it Amara? Tamara. And there are many places connected with her as well, but not all bona fide. But that's a kind of potential for tourism there. So maybe there are some writers or authors or great figures in Armenia that you don't know so much, but everybody loves, so it's connected with many places. This is really good to develop for tourism because it brings you to the heart of the Armenian people and shows you what's important to them. So this is something for you to think about for your homework or when I come back next year. You have a year to think about it. Okay? Yeah, next please. Yeah, let's skip this now because we're running a little behind. You can skip that. There are many places. This is the temple that you just saw the movie before. There are many different side writings, but we'll skip that because we want to go to the next section. Yeah. That's the moon view. Yeah. Saigyo Matsubasho, the famous haiku poet, Saigyo, the famous poet, and Teika, who made the collection, they all lived in this area called Saga, and they looked up at the moon at night, and they wrote poems about the moon, and then they would write poems about the deer that they saw there. And I'm living in this same area now, and every day I'm translating the poems, and I look at the moon, and it's the same moon that Matsubasho saw. And then when I go out on the street, I meet the deer at nighttime, and I think, oh, they're the descendants of the deer that was written in poems about 1,000 years ago. So that's very, very inspirational. The next, please. So this is an over-tourism project. We won't skip that for today. Can you just go back to that one thing? This, in Japan now, they have over-tourism in some places. This is the main street of the town where I live, called Arashiyama. And you can see it's totally crowded with people. So this is the next stage. Once you get the people to come, you have to think about how to manage it then in a SDGs way, so that it's sustainable. But that can be our next topic. Yeah, next please. Good. Now let's stop it. So the next topic I'd like to talk to you about is the True Japan project. So my True Japan project was is created similar to the Cool Japan. Have any of you ever heard of the Cool Japan project? Yeah. This was created by the Japanese government some 60 years ago. It's quite old. It was created to introduce anime and manga and those kind of light, playful Japanese culture. But my idea is that we should be introducing the deeper aspects of Japanese culture, which found the bedrock upon which the anime and manga are created. Because all of the great manga and anime, they're all based on some classics. So I feel that now we've got to the stage in Japan as it matures as a tourist country, we can promote more an understanding of the deeper aspects of Japanese culture. And I hope this is something you can also think about for Armenia as well. So I think people are ready for that. You know, they're ready to learn to be exposed to the deeper aspects of each culture. And this is what will help us to work towards peace in the world today, in a world where there's so much conflict. So I have several projects in my True Japan, and one of the key themes is trying to recreate ancient culture in a way that makes it accessible to young people and to this contemporary society. So, for example, for the Hyakuno issue, or the 100 poets, I created the card game. And the card game allows people to play in English, in contemporary English, but still to learn the real meaning of the ancient poems. So that's one project. And the next project I'm going to introduce you to is the Manyoshu. Can we go there? Have any of you ever heard about the Manyoshu? Yes? Yes? Yeah, you have had it. Good. Yes? Everybody? No, okay. Not yet, but you will. For the Manyoshu, I'm doing a complete translation of the Manyoshu. There are 4,500 poems, and it's the oldest work of Japanese literature that still survives. And in addition to that, I'm doing a Manyoshu poem journey project. And this is, I'll explain that to you after the first one. So last year I started the translation, and I translated 600 poems already. So, but there's 4,500. So it will take me maybe 5 or 6 years to do it. I have 8 young Japanese scholars helping me, so it's a very good project. Let's next, please. Yeah, next, please. Yeah. So the first thing about the Manyoshu is a work of the highest literary standard. The poems are all excellent quality. And second, please. Next, please. Another very, very important aspect of the Manyoshu is that the students, or not the students, but the readers of the people who lived at that time, they had a kind of shamanistic nature, so that they could access the other world, the world of the shaman. And so that, for example, there are many poems about seeing the dead, deceased person, but not being able to reach it. Can we go to the next one, please? Yeah. So if you look at this poem here, which is one of my favorite poems, cloud waves rise in the sea of heaven. The moon is a boat, it grows till it hides in a wood of stars. This beautiful poem seems as if it's describing cloud waves rise in the sea of heaven. It seems like it's describing just a simple, natural, fun, like verse for children or something, where the cloud waves rise. Clouds are not waves, right? And the heaven is not the sea. But in the poem, it's full of opposites, right? And the moon is not a boat, but in the poem it becomes a boat. And the stars are not woods. So it seems like it's full of contradictions. But if you look at the original Japanese, the last word is miu. And when the poet uses that word, it means that he's reporting something that he saw as a factual basis. And what he writes in the poem becomes reality. So he's saying that he saw in the sky the moon had actually become a boat and was actually sailing away. It's not just a fantastical description. He's describing the real moon becoming a real boat and hiding away the stars. So it's a truly beautiful poem, but it also shows you that the world view is very, very exclusively important. Now, this kind of shamanistic view of the world we had in ancient Ireland, we had in many countries, I'm sure you had in Armenia as well. But in terms of this world view being reported in writing, the only book is the Manual. So because of that, this work is so important for mankind. Next. Yeah, next please. But, so is there no relevance then to the contemporary society? Actually, the Manyoshu is a mirror of contemporary Japanese society, because there are poems on child poverty, suicide, death from overwork, LGBT, many, many, many different kinds of poems that address issues or topics that are very relevant in contemporary Japanese society. So the most ancient work of Japanese poetry can actually be one of our greatest finds. And I feel that when you read the true essence of Armenian literature, you'll find it's also be very inspiring in thinking of ways to live more creatively in solving social problems or issues. Next, please. So I'm hoping through this project that the Manyoshu will become one of the 100 world masterpieces, and that it will be read at prestigious universities around the world. As you know, Harvard and Oxford University, they have 100 best classes. And very few Japanese works are in this. And so I feel very confident that the Manyoshu will become recognized as one of the top 100 works of literature, and that students at the elite universities around the world will read this book. And then when they come to Japan, as diplomats and politicians, they'll know more about ancient culture. Next, please. Yeah. So next, please. So I started this with a crowdfunding project and raised the money to help to pay the young scholars. So far, it's going very well. Next, please. Yeah. Now, in addition to this, and this is something that must be very relevant to Armenia. Next, please. There are about 2,300 stone poetry monuments all over Japan. And a stone poetry monuments mean a stone with the Manyoshu poems inscribed on it. These poems, but the language is written in a very difficult way, and so people can't read them. And even if they could read them, they wouldn't understand the meaning because the poetry is so long. So I decided to create a project to try and solve that. Can you go to the next slide, please? And I created these signboards. And on these signboards, on the right, we have the original poem written in Chinese characters. Then we have the wabun, and then we have contemporary, on the left-hand side, we have the contemporary Japanese translation with an explanation of the poem. Then on the bottom, we have the English translation. And if you press on the QR code, you can actually read an English explanation. And there, so far, I've created several different things. Next, please. I'm hoping to create at least 1,000 of these signboards. So that they're in many different areas all over Japan. I've completed ones in Toyama Prefecture, in Nara Prefecture, and in Fukuoka. And it helps promote local tourism, and it helps solve over-tourism, and people can travel to these areas and they can eat the local fish or drink the local sake and read about the way the ancient people lived. And I always write about the actual feelings in the poems, so they can think, oh yes, that was what they were feeling when they wrote the poems. Next, please. Yeah, so tap out question. Yeah. So next, please. Yeah. So this is an example of some that we have placed outside the Manyoshu happenings. Yeah. So this is an example. Next, please. Good. Next. Right. So this is Kasada High School. Yeah. Next, please. Now we have a look at our meaning. Yeah? So I'm not so familiar with Armenian literature, but I just wanted to introduce to you a few writers to see if you could think of ways, similar kinds of projects. So in the Japanese project that I created, we have the poem stone monuments all over Japan, and we're creating ways to make journeys, literary journeys. Next, please. So all of you, of course, know this religion, and I don't know whether if you could create a similar project around him, or if there's already been one, or if there's other writers that you could think about to develop cultural tourism, because I think that's really, really important. In the days that we live in, there's too little understanding of each other's cultures and too much fighting between neighboring countries. And I think one of the best ways to deal with this is to increase our understanding of different cultures. So I just mentioned this particular author as one example. You can skip through the slide because I'm sure everybody knows him. But he seems to have been an extraordinary man and writer, poet, philosopher. There must be many, many similar kinds of authors. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be the best known one. It could be from some particular region and promote the tourism in a particular region. So, next please. Yeah, so we pass on. Yeah. He wrote about Armenian people and the sufferings of the Armenian people. He was one of the first modern writers to do that. So, the sense of national pride and national identity is very, very important. Next, please. Yep. We'll pass on. Good. We can skip Georgia because that was for yesterday. And now we're going to the last topic, which is natural disasters. So this seems very unrelated. But actually, it's quite related, and we'll see that as we go along. Because I'm not talking so much about natural disasters as about the culture of Japan and how the natural disasters influence Japan's culture. And all of you, I'm sure, remember the great earthquake of 1988 and how much damage that affected Armenia. And I feel that there's a lot that we can learn from Japan and the ways in which they deal with earthquakes and other natural disasters. But not only that, but also the cultural background and how natural disasters influence Japanese culture. Let's look at this, please. So, many of you know that Japan is a country that coexists with natural disasters and has done that from ancient times. And we'll go to the next one, please. And we have an awe and reverence for nature, and so on. And next, please. We have earthquakes, tsunami, typhoons, floods, mudslides, etc., etc. Yep, next, please. And 10% of the world's major earthquakes occur in the vicinity. Next, please. So this is a kind of typical kind of image that you can see of a temple or a shrine collapsed after this is Taisho. Next, please. Good. So I'm going to introduce you now to the Hojo-oki by Kamano Chome. This notes that this writes about an earthquake, but also aftershocks and other natural disasters. And it's one of the most famous recordings of a natural disaster in Japanese literature. Let's have a look at the beginning. Next, please. Good. So, the flow of the river is ceaseless and its waters never the same. The bubbles that float in the pools, now vanishing, now forming, are not of long duration. So in the world are man and his dwellings. So we remember the cherry blossom poem and how that was the fragility of all human life. And here we have Kamano Chome comparing human life and buildings to bubbles that form in the water and disappear. such as the fragility of human life. Let's go to the next page, please. So we'll just read the last paragraph. The city is the same, the people are as numerous as ever, but of those I used to know, there are 1 or 2 in 20 remain. They die in the morning. They are born in the evening, like foam on the water. So our lives are just like foam. But you can see that from this very, very early work of literature that the sense of the natural disasters has been deeply inscribed in the Japanese consciousness. Yeah? So we'll go to the next one, please. In Japan, we have the Shinto religion that reveres nature and ancestors. And it's a way of thinking that seeks to protect nature and live together with nature and humans. And it believes that gods reside in all things. Next, please. So, in Shinto, there is a belief that natural disasters are caused by wild gods, araburu, or divine punishment, and people trying to appease this anger through rituals and prayer. So let's go to the next one, please. And one of the most famous examples of this is the example of Sugawara no Michizane, who was a famous scholar and a poet. He's in the 100 poems, 1 poet each. And he was banished to Dazaifu. And he was very bitter about that. And he actually died there. There are many, many legends about it. Next, please. But after his death, many members of the imperial court died, one illness or another. There were typhoons, epidemics, etc., in various parts of Japan, and there was a lightning strike on the Seiryo, and many people were killed. And the emperor then finally passed away too. So they believed that this was the vengeful spirit of Michizane, who had been exiled and died in innocence. So, next slide, please. They, in order to appease the curse, they transformed Michizane into a god, even though he was a king. And they're not only a god, but also a god of learning. Next, please. So, we can see there's 2 things in this story. One is awe, or ifu. And the second one is reverence, ike. These are very, very important words in Japanese culture. Awe is the feeling of fear and anxiety towards something that is beyond one's power. And reverence is the feeling of fear and respect towards someone sublime. So, in the case of Sugawara Michizane, it was both. One was because he was causing all these disasters, so he was feared for his extraordinary power. But the other one, he was admired for his great scholarly learning. So he was both Ifu and Iki. And both of these concepts you can see combined in the life story of Michizane. And they also tell us a lot about how the Japanese have a deep respect for natural disasters and see them as a part of nature, which they must show true respect to them. Next, please. So, this brings us to the next point, and this is sonae, preparing for acting in nature. And it's related also to disaster prevention. And as you know, Japan is the #1 country in the world for disaster prevention. And this disaster prevention has existed for many centuries. For example, Happiness Union diverted the rivers that were causing floods. And in the Edo period, the Tonegawa was diverted so that the floods, when it overflowed, it would not overflow in the middle of Edo. And so the Japanese, for many, many, many centuries, have been working very actively towards prevention of natural disasters. And this is part of their sonae for being prepared. They have two concepts in it. One is to avoid as much as possible by making the proper infrastructure. And the second one is, it's going to come anyway, but when it comes, what should you do as a person? We'll talk about that next time. So, they prepare in advance by taking appropriate action and without panicking when a disaster actually occurs. So a lot of it's education. So during my trip here, it was the 11th of March. Do you know that date? Anybody know that date? The 11th of March in Japan? The big earthquake, exactly. It was the anniversary of the big earthquake. And I have a radio program every week on Tuesday. So I had to do my radio program from Georgia. And when I was doing the recording on the Zoom, the announcer said that all through Japan on that day, people received messages on their phone. Let's prepare for the earthquake. So the whole country has a kind of national consciousness about the prevention of earthquakes. So I feel that there's a lot of hints and useful things that Armenian people could learn from in Japan in relation to this particular thing. And again, it's because it's actually part of the culture and has been such deeply embedded in the culture for so many centuries that it just naturally evolved into these other activities, which we see in the mobile phone messages coming from. Let's go next one, please. So, when we talk about the preparations that the ordinary person would take, having your emergency bag with food and other supplies, secure furniture that doesn't fall, make sure that fire extinguishers and smoke alarms are in working order, checking the evacuation route, discussing the plans with your family in advance. So, these kind of things. Next, please. So, the other thing is, I mentioned already that the rivers, is re-channeling the rivers so that the floods go to different places. Next one, we'll introduce this is in 1659, a large fire known as the Meireki Great Fire broke out in Japan. And because of this, next please, the Japanese learned from this lesson to make the wooden buildings more separated, so that when one burnt, they wouldn't all burn together. So this is the kind of innovation and prevention techniques that the Japanese have been employing for a long time. I don't know whether you're following the news, but the American government recently just cancelled the USAID program. So Japan will become increasingly a leader through the work of JICA, I think. And also, as you know, more and more natural disasters are happening everywhere in the world, all over the world. And so it's really a time for people they can benefit from the great knowledge and techniques that the Japanese have developed. Next, please. This is another kind of prevention. So having the sprinklers placed around important cultural properties so that if there's a fire, they can immediately be extinguished. Next, please. And this is Toji Temple. Toji Temple, as you know, it has the central pillar, the supporting pillar, is just placed on the rock. It's not built into it, so that if the earthquakes come, the building can go backwards and forwards, and there's nothing to stop. Good, next please. Yeah. So, and then another topic I'd like to mention is the taskiairu, or to help each other. So I think Japan is famous all around the world for this. That when big disasters come, everybody remains very calm and ordered, and they line up to get the emergency things. And so there's no panicking, and this is a feature of Japanese society. I think it's also because people have this kind of consensus built in from a very, very young age that they must all collaborate and work together. Next, please. Yeah. So oftentimes individually, if there's an individual accident or something, the Japanese may be hesitant because they think, the other person might prefer not to have the thing like something. But when it's a big disaster, the Japanese all gather together very quickly, very easily. And this is, it's a very remarkable quality. Something person. So go to the next one, please. Yeah. So we're getting to the end almost now, but for 2 years now I've been working as the JICA Cultural Affairs, Cultural Minister, and I was the first person appointed to this post 2 years ago. And I'm sure many of you already know that Japan JICA is at the forefront of disaster damage mitigation and subsequent recovery. And the motto of JICA is always build back better. It's not just rebuild it, but make it better than it was. And this particular phrase was actually adopted by President Biden, who used that as his slogan. And up to now, JICA has been engaging in many activities around the world, but there will be more need for that as the time goes on. So they will have to play an even larger role in the world. They can help us in many, many ways. So I'm really happy to be here, telling you a little bit about the JICA work and how wonderful it is to be involved in the project. Next slide, please. Yeah, good. So, yes. So promoting recovery and making it better, build back better. That's the main thing. Yeah. Good. The next slide, please. Good. Yeah, two other things. We often think of disasters as negative things, totally negative things, but there are certain positive aspects to disasters. And we'll all in the world will have to get more and more used to disasters. They'll be part of everyday life, the destruction of the environment. And I think looking at Japan from the outside, I think two positive things are resilience and renewal. And resilience is a very, very important theme in the world today, how to withstand adversity, suffering, overcome it, including difficult measures. And that's resilience. And I think that excessive amount of natural disasters have built a great resilience in the Japanese people. But secondly, renewal. I think the Japanese love to make new things. They're very creative. Always, and I feel that may be influenced by the fact that things are so quickly destroyed. And they've often been in situations where they had to completely rebuild and remake. And that has, I think, been two positive influences of the natural disasters in the Japanese culture. So we, next slide please. Yeah, this is the last slide for today. I'm also a printmaker, by the way, and I created this print when Mount Fuji became a World Heritage Site. And it's Mount Fuji on an origami bird flying around the world. And the waves become little birds, helping them in this way. And this was my dream for the dissemination of Japanese culture around the world. But today, the final message I'd like to leave to you is, you can see I have a great passion for Japanese culture and a great desire to disseminate it. But I want today, through the JICA work, JICA, as you know, is helping countries around the world. So how can this help you to think about Armenia and yourself, in your life? Still as a student now, but soon to be a member of society. And what does it mean to be Armenian? How can we think about sharing the culture of Armenia with other people who love it, and promoting the culture of Armenia for tourism, and thinking about other things, like for example, when Sakurada-san asked me to think about natural disasters and culture, I was so surprised because I never thought about them being related to culture, but actually they are. And so many things come back to the culture. And must be so many fascinating things about Armenian culture, which I think will be so valuable to the rest of us. Because when you learn another culture, you're not just having that wonderful exposure to another culture, but it also gives you a totally different way of looking at your own culture. And the exposure to Japan was that for me. It was a world of endless discoveries. but also a way to completely look at the culture which I belong. So I ended up having a bigger world view. So my dream is that through the work in Japan, through the work in JICA, we can create a worldwide literature and cultural travel, so that the people of Georgia and Armenia and Ireland and Japan, and all the countries of the world, are promoting, helping, sharing their cultural assets through travel, and through helping in different disasters and so on. And then this, I believe, is the UNESCO goal of culture. Through culture, we can finally achieve peace. So, thank you all very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any. And we'll give a little round of applause for Timothy as well. You've got 10 minutes.
I do, but I will wait.
Yeah. You have a question? No? No.
So I was wondering, first of all, thank you for your lecture, and you mentioned 11 and not 11 when the making the cake, and I was wondering if there is if people who went through this are creating new poetry or literary works, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know in detail, but I do know that they are many.
Okay.
Yeah. So the contemporary literature is not my specialty, but there are many books.
Yeah, I was wondering because there are several genres in Japanese literature, like atomic bomb literature
Yes.
or consensus anticipation
Yes.
literature, and I was wondering if new genre has appeared after the earthquake.
Yes.
And what's left to do.
Yes, it has. So I can't give you so much information about it, but I do know there was a lot, and also many TV programs, and it's still very much resonant. Many programs on the BLM, and it was around that time, so it's still a very important topic. And I think something like 50,000 people are still not able to return. So it's very much affected people's lives in a very negative way. And so it's obviously it's going to be around for a long time. Good. Any questions? No?
Express our emotions through also through literature. And we also believe that Japanese people are more resilient, and they are not, they can keep their emotions in themselves. And when they write about disasters, it concerns possible country and influence of how do they express like the country is it like reserved or it's how do they express their emotions?
That's a very good question. Yeah. People say that the Japanese are not emotional, but to me they're the most emotional. And they're so emotional they have to hide it. Because otherwise it would just come out all the time. Isn't that true?
Maybe.
Maybe. He doesn't know.
I know they are emotional, but they keep their emotions.
Yeah, but
They don't show.
yeah, but the reason why they keep them hidden is because they're so emotional. Because they need to. It's not just that they're not emotional, or less emotional. They're more emotional, and that sensitivity to seasons and food and all aspects of life. You can see that. I mean, that's beauty. Beauty is an emotion, and the feeling for beauty, and the love of beauty, and the pursuit of beauty. That's a very universal quality. So, whether we would find that, but the indirection is also very important. But indirection is very important in Western literature. So rather than saying "I love you," we say something a little bit more indirect, like losing a war or something like that. But those are very typical ways of expressing. Good. How about some questions from the students here? I talk about them. I think it's really important to relate literature to contemporary society. So I had a column in the Saturday newspaper for 5 years, and I always introduced the LGBT, the DHK, or all of the problems which I think need to be solved through poems. So it's a bit more gentle. I think every society has room for improvement, and that one very good way to discuss that or to make it as an issue for people to think about is to write about it through poetry. That was my own way. I don't think people avoid the topic of Karoshi. What was it? Karoshi what? LGBT. So who avoids them? Yeah. Yeah, I think that in traditional Japanese culture, there is a tendency not to talk about this. But I think it's changing now. For younger people, I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Especially like you should be kind of really right now, and but like a critical stance,
Critical?
political
Stance.
stance.
People rarely discuss which politicians. They don't like to be asked. And what about what we have death penalty?
If we talk about like Karoshi, maybe we could be working.
Yeah.
Everybody cares about the health.
Yes.
Not like
But I think we should talk about that more. And then the other ones that you mentioned? Yeah, LGBT is becoming much more common now. It still takes more time. Yeah. So, yes, I think it's a very good question to ask. Yeah? Any other questions? Yes? Absolutely. If I had to think of one word, it would be the Tales of Lisa. Have you read that? Okay. So I introduced that in the slide presentation today. Can you go back there, Tom? Thank you. Remember that? It's up to the very top. There, that's it, the bottom. Yeah, the bottom slide. The book, yeah, that's it. The Tales of Aesop. Yeah, that's my translation from Penguin Books. And this book is extraordinary, I think, because it's for the Japanese aesthetic. It's so beautifully expressed. It's indirection, a lot of indirection. And it's about Narihira, who was supposed to be a great lover of the Heian period. And the reason why he became the ideal lover was he was handsome, very manly, but also he wrote beautiful poems. And that was the qualification for becoming the greatest lover of the time, was to be able to write poems. And he influenced the tale of Genji as well. So Genji is one of the models for the tale of Genji, is this, because Genji also loved Genji. Yeah. So he was considered a playboy now, but in that time he wasn't, because that was just the style of the time. So,
I also noticed that karma is mentioned in that
karma?
Yeah, Sam is getting from Gadai and
Yes.
he was living, and then in the future when he got older, he got hit by karma for everything. So that's really, it's really,
I beg your pardon? Yes. Yeah, and do you believe in karma?
It's really, I think that people either do something that will, if they do something that will come, or it's also European culture, because people tend to believe that when you do good things or bad things, not mostly about better things, but it's about everyone who's around you.
Good, good. I believe in it too. I think it's great. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or comments about Armenia, and any thoughts about how you could make this work for Armenia? What did you mean?
It's very good you said that you care if it's old or something from ancient times, you still pretty much in the same for most of them now.
Yeah.
And it's the same with everyone with the old times.
Yeah.
It's still, when you analyze it, you see that we do have some problems. No matter years or years.
Good. So that, yes, yeah.
If you try, there are a lot of problems with the presentation about how you actually do something.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that's preparation, the presentation, really after this kind of translation type question. So there are many other things that are not translated into other languages. I think it's pretty good to work. So yeah, I think we need to work forward this way. But it's hard. I think many people test it. When you think about which pieces of literature or to translate into other languages.
Would you like to work in that field?
It's a great question. I'm very late. I was born in Mexico.
Totally done.
In Russia. So I can speak Russian. I was learning the short time. So because I want to work in this paper, I have to improve my Armenian language skills.
Is that correct? I'm sure you can do it. How about you? What did you think today?
I'm also not from Armenia, and I don't know anything about Armenian culture. I just came to visit my friends.
Where did did you come from?
Russia.
Okay. Very good. All right. Is it our time, by the way? お時間ですか？